My start really began before law school.
Okay.
Getting into sports. I was a sports management major at La Crosse. I left the sports management program and went to work as an intern with Milwaukee Brewers in scouting.
Okay.
While I was in scouting, I met Harvey Keene Jr., and I was actually coming up to the Twin Cities to tour some law schools.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him if I could tag along for the weekend scouting, and we went to the Metrodome together, and he sat behind me and started telling me about scouting, and after about 3 weeks to a month, he actually hired me as an associate scout. So I actually started as a scout before I ever went to law school. The months of February, March, and April, I spent a lot of time in the Metrodome. And I watch all the high school, all the colleges play and do coverage there. We then have a lot of open workouts in the summer. I think we have 5 of them throughout the state. I spend time doing that. And truthfully, a lot of the time is just time on the phone with my supervisors, talking about players and writing reports. So much of that work's done on the weekend and at nights. Practice law during the day, so it's a good gig. Scouting for me is an outlet. It's not my profession. I practice law, and that's what I'm passionate about. And for me, scouting is just something I love to do. And truthfully, it's a lot of the reason is I love working with young men and making their dreams come true. And then also just being around the people in baseball is fantastic. I got all of my scouting background from just being an apprentice of Harvey Keene. And he's one of my mentors. And truthfully, when I started with the Brewers, we had kind of an all-star cast of scouts. Yeah. When I was in the front office going through the draft process and being in the draft room in 2005, my scouting director was Jack Zarensic. Our cross-checkers were Tommy Allison, who went on to become a scouting director, Ray Montgomery, who went on to become a scouting director, Bobby Heck, who went on to become a scouting director. Bruce Side, who was an area scout then, is now our scouting director. So I was learning from pretty good baseball minds at the time. So all of those people have been my mentors, and then also getting to know other scouts from other teams and kind of having them teach me little things along the way and picking up nuggets. Right. Mark Wilson with the Twins, Terry Ryan, even being out with him when he took his hiatus from the Twins. I joined Weber Law Group in February of 2010, so just over 2 years. I do a lot of work with minor league baseball teams, and then now into some summer collegiate league teams, and also I've been engaged to write business plans for some sports ventures. I practice business, bankruptcy, and sports law. Okay. So fortunately, I haven't represented any athletes on the bankruptcy side. Right. On the business side, I've represented management, so I represent the team owners. I've done that for, I've co-counseled on a major league valuation. I've done work for independent minor league teams and summer collegiate teams. Your legal career really starts in law school. And I started clerking for Clark Griffith, worked for the Northern League, and you start to learn a little bit about practicing law. But truthfully, when you leave law school, it's like starting a whole new education. Right. Because law school teaches you to think like a lawyer. It doesn't tell you how to practice law. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster, and keeping in mind that I started practicing in the worst economy in the last 80 years. Yeah. I think I got my bar results a few days before the market crashed. I've done consulting for minor league baseball teams, so I've done player procurement, and then also on the business aspect. So anywhere on the business side from how do we generate revenue in the stadium? What are the market inefficiencies? Can we raise ticket prices? Concessions? What can we do on the concession side? Also just working with leagues. I think that's a whole interesting beast in itself that goes unnoticed, and the policies of leagues, how leagues operate, it's really hidden in the law. There is no law. It's governed by a contract between partners, but they're not real partners. It's an unincorporated association in most leagues. So I've dealt with, consulting on league issues, especially for new franchises. So let's say you're starting a franchise in what used to be the Northern League. I would consult on what the owners are going to be looking for, what you need to show in a business plan, how to be successful, what kind of capital needs are there, things of that nature. It's just like working for any other small business, medium-sized business, truthfully. But there's sports involved. And I can say that generally about sports law, it's business in the sports realm. So, it's fascinating because there's a product at the end of the day that everyone gets to enjoy and see, and your work is very public. When I was an intern with the Brewers, I did some work for them, some industry studies. Now it's more so I enjoy it as a professor. Okay. I look at arbitration cases, and it's a legal argument, basically. Yeah. You're using comparables. It's just like practicing law. Differentiate on the facts when it's against you, and then analogize when it's good for you. Yep. So, if I want to compare Joe Mauer to Johnny Bench, I come up with some statistical argument about why they're similar or why they're different if it's not favorable to me. So I really enjoy studying arbitration, but I don't do any work in it right now. I would love to. be with a Major League Baseball team working on some of that arbitration. Every club treats it differently, I believe. Sometimes they have in-house counsel that works on it. A lot of them outsource it to law firms as well. There's also consultants that do arbitration work, so it just depends on what club you go to. One, I love talking about sports business, and I love creating arguments among the students to talk about the topics of the day and informing them of how professional sports has been shaped. And truthfully, NCAA as well. Drug testing, just eligibility rules and whatnot. For instance, talking about federal baseball and how the baseball antitrust exemption started and how that case started and how it's impacted the game of baseball and the business of baseball throughout time. Messersmith-McNally, how free agency started. And it's really one decision by one arbitrator that has opened the floodgates to these huge salaries. I mean, before that, we had one-year renewable contracts. And who knows how long that would have continued without that arbitrator's decision. So I love analyzing the law and how the law has impacted the business of sport. It is very enjoyable, and I love just the passion that students bring to sports law. I think it's very unique in terms of law school. People typically aren't passionate about property or torts, but they're passionate about sports. And so when you apply that to the analysis of law, it just makes for a really exciting class. And for instance, we're talking about the Vikings stadium financing. We just opened up topic. And it's just phenomenal to see how passionate people get about it on both sides of the aisle. And you're talking about some budding lawyers creating legal arguments. It's just fun to watch. If I pose a really challenging question to a student and they knock it out, that's gratifying. Because I feel like I've informed them of something and now they get it. They've grasped the concept. Let's say it's the non-statutory exemption. And we're talking about the Mackey rules. And they take the Mackey law and apply it to a hypothetical and knock it out. That's gratifying. First of all, there's no state action against the NCAA. So they have a lot of leeway in how they regulate. And we already know how thick the NCAA rule book is. I don't see any reason they would stop at regulating social media, especially when it could impact the dollars at some point. The NCAA, just like anybody else, any big company I should say, is a PR thing. And so they want to make sure that their image is controlled. And when other people are out there through social media, maybe disparaging the NCAA or talking bad about certain universities or whatnot, they are going to try to control that. And they're going to push the limit probably. And it'll be interesting in the upcoming years seeing if that's going to be challenged. Sports is really interesting. And it's always been treated a little differently by the courts, I believe, once you step inside the line. You think about the violence that happens in sports that's controlled and contained and within rules. At what point does it cross the line? And I think a lot of times they talk about intent. And when you get into the Bounty case, you're talking about intent to hurt. But we're also talking about football, which is a very violent game. And how do you determine the intent on a field of hurting someone versus just tackling someone? And do you go case by case? Because maybe you're a Saints player and there's an incentive, a financial incentive to hurt someone, but you didn't mean to hurt them. You were just doing your job, and they got hurt. You're going to take all those cases to court? It's tough. So it's going to be fun to watch it unfold. To get into the sports law field, I get this question a lot. And I recommend, one, setting your expectations. If you want to work in sports, you have to sacrifice a good-paying job. And you need to start early. So when you're in college or in high school, you need to start interning for sports teams. And we're going to find out how bad you want to work in sports then. Because those are long, grueling hours for no money. And so my advice is start early, intern, and don't expect to make a lot of money. And that's how you do it. So you have to build your resume and show over time that you really, really want to work in sports. Because let's face it, everyone's a fan of sport, and everyone says they love sports. It's another thing to sacrifice to work in sports. We don't technically have internships. We have taken law clerks in the past, and I have one right now. Typically, how that happens is I'm a mentor at William Mitchell and at St. Thomas Law School, and either I've taken on a mentee as a law clerk, or someone in the sports law class has contacted me and said they're interested in working for me, things like that. So typically, I take law students as our clerk.